ever noticed that you need space from people, but not from your dog? You never tell your dog or cat, oh, I need 3 days away from you. So, why do relationships with people sometimes feel exhausting, suffocating, or overwhelming? The answer might not be that the other people did something wrong. It has nothing to do with other people. The answer is rooted in your childhood. Welcome to the Connection Catalyst podcast, episode number 33. I'm Karolina, the Connection Catalyst. I'm here to help you experience deeper connection with yourself, others, and the whole world around you. So today I will talk about this need for space that many people, especially introverts and especially avoidant attachment style people, I was speaking about avoidant attachment in one of the previous episodes. If you don't know what it is, go have a look. Or highly independent people have this kind of need. So many people identify as someone who needs a lot of space, right? People who get overwhelmed by relationships. But what if needing space isn't actually the problem? What if the real problem is that you are around people that don't make you feel like you can be who you are and make you feel disconnected from your own self? There is a difference between solitude and escape. If we want space in a healthy way, it's very nourishing, right? We have healthy alone time. We can discover our needs, our desires, and especially for people like me, Enneagram personality type 6 or type 2 or type 9. I was speaking about Enneagram in one of the previous episodes as well. If you don't know what it is, you can check it out. And anyone that is kind of like a people pleaser needs alone time because as people pleasers, I explained what it is also in one of the previous episodes. We actually can merge into the other person and not really distinguish between our needs and someone else's needs, our desires and someone else's desires. If we are highly empathetic, especially, then we actually need alone time in a healthy way in order to find ourselves and in order to know what are our needs, our desires, because otherwise it's all mixed up. But unhealthy alone time is more like an escape. It's more like a relief from pressure that you feel when you're around others. So ask yourself this question: when I am alone, what exactly am I getting if I don't have anyone around me? And the answer can be authenticity, can be freedom, can be peace, can be permission to be yourself. So, for example, a woman spends a weekend alone and suddenly feels relaxed, right? So, not because nobody is around, but because she no longer has to pretend who she is not and monitor everyone else's emotions to try to give to them. So then she can finally ask herself, what do I want? What do I need? Right? So then the pressure is that you need to take care of everyone else first before you take care of yourself. So that could be an answer. And why some people lose themselves in relationships? Because people learned as children that connection came at a cost, right? So if I want to be connected to mom or dad, it's not for free. I need to do as they say, right? So the cost was suppressing your emotions, ignoring your own needs, hiding your opinions or perspectives or preferences, becoming who others wanted you to be rather than who you wanted to be. So these people learned that if I want love, I need to stop being myself. And that's actually very dysfunctional because then we become people pleasers, as I mentioned, and we feel like we can't really be ourselves around other people. So then this need for space becomes unhealthy because it stems from trauma and it stems from escapism rather than truth. So, for example, in childhood can be like a little boy says, I don't want to hug grandma. But then the parent replies like, don't be rude, go hug her. You have to do it. She's family. And then the child learns, okay, other people's comfort matters way more than my truth in the moment. So then this becomes a relationship blueprint. How this boy then, as an adult, as a man, will act in relationships. He might become an overgiving person, for example, and not accommodate towards his truths at the cost of someone else's preferences and opinions and needs. There is a trauma that is maybe not as known as the trauma of abandonment that many people have, that is called enmeshment trauma. And I might talk about it even more in further episodes, but most people know the abandonment trauma, right? So abandonment says, I will lose people around me. People will abandon me, obviously, right? But not many people understand enmeshment trauma, which is I will lose myself. Because enmeshment is when you literally become like so connected to one of your caregivers that you like enmeshed with them, that you like need to be and do and behave as them in order to please them and in order to receive love and approval and everything else as a child. So this creates a completely different relationship pattern. And people with enmeshment trauma might need their own space, especially when they realize that they have been in it, right? Because then they need to discover who they are once again. And usually enmeshment and abandonment go hand in hand. Because, for example, if my father abandoned me as a child, then I could have enmeshed with my mother, right? And then in adulthood, there could be a situation where I enter the room and immediately start asking myself these questions like, oh, what do they need? How should I behave? What should I do to please them? What should I say? What is the correct way to act? How do I avoid upsetting them? And alike, right? So, without realizing in this moment, I abandon myself before anyone else can abandon myself, right? So, it's like an internalized dynamic that we adopted as children because we internalized our caregivers inside. So now these patterns are playing out in our subconscious mind, even without our conscious choice, unless we are aware of them and reprogram them, of course. So, why relationship feels suffocating for some people? It's not often the problem of the partner, right? The problem is what happens inside of you when someone gets close to you. So then you might begin people pleasing, as I said. You might begin making sure that the reactions that you get are great, or just monitoring them very like in detail, right? You can maybe feel like you need to walk on eggshells around your partner, or maybe you can just feel like you need to, I don't know, edit yourself, like you need to be someone else, wear masks in order to be liked or loved by this person. So eventually, this kind of dynamic is completely exhausting because you can't maintain it for too long. Because if you try to all the time meet someone else's needs without caring about yourself, and if you're walking on eggshells all the time, or if you're wearing an inauthentic mask, then of course you're not going to be happy and of course you're going to be tired with it. So then you conclude, oh, I need space, right? But what you actually need is to be yourself and to be with yourself. A classic example, even from my own life, is a husband wants quality time, but a wife immediately feels trapped, not because he is controlling and attached, but because she subconsciously feels like too much closeness or too much time with him means losing freedom. And this is classic when it comes to the dynamic of anxiously attached person and avoidantly attached person. And if you don't know about attachment styles, make sure to check out my other podcast episode that I previously made about that, where I explain everything. So then this can create the push and pull relationship cycle. It's a very painful dynamic where like one person says, I need you, but then another person is like, oh, you're way too close. Go away, right? But then the anxiously, usually attached person is like, why are you abandoning me? Why are you leaving me? But then the avoidantly attached person is like, oh, yeah, I'm too scared to be too close. I'm going to lose myself, lose my freedom, and so on. So many couples actually got stuck in this kind of cycle for years and years without realizing. That's why knowing about attachment styles is so freaking crucial, because it can explain exactly what happens in your relationship dynamic. And when you're aware of it, you can shift it. For example, a woman really longs for connection with her partner, But when he becomes emotionally available, she feels overwhelmed suddenly and she withdraws. And then he feels rejected and also pulls away. And so then she feels abandoned and chases him, right? She wants him back. And then the cycle repeats, and it can repeat over and over and over again until we break it. And how to break a cycle and get out of the attachment style wounds, I explain in detail in my course Emotion Alchemy Blueprint, because in this course I explain how to work on your emotions in a way where you go to the root origin of your wounding in childhood. So then you can reprogram it, rewire your subconscious mind, and stop reacting like this. So you can find the link below the YouTube video and below the Spotify. It's important to mention in this topic of needing space that there are boundaries that we have. And sometimes, if we are sensitive, we actually really need space, or just when we want to discover more about ourselves, like, or maybe when we want to meditate or create some art. Of course, then we need to be on our own, right? I always write songs when I'm in my own space. It would be harder for me, although not as hard as for introverts, to do it when I'm around other people, because I personally can close myself from everyone and just be in my own bubble, even if there are people around. But there are people that struggle with it, that are more sensitive to all the emotions and energies of the people around. So they really need this space, especially artists, Enneagram 4 or Wing 4 types. So, of course, this is a boundary that we need to be aware of. And boundaries are not walls. Actually, most people think that boundaries are only about saying no, but boundaries are also about saying yes, because boundaries show us our preferences, what we feel, what we need, what we want, what we don't want, and what is true for us, right? So, as an example, maybe your partner wants to spend every weekend socializing, but you prefer one social event on Saturday and then one quiet day on Sunday, let's say. And neither of the people is wrong, but the relationship challenge is to find solutions that is a win-win, that honor both desires. So maybe in this case, every second weekend you will have 2 days social, and every second weekend you will have 1 day social, 1 day space, or in any other different way, or maybe 1 weekend totally social and 1 weekend totally as a couple, right? There is always an integration, a win-win scenario that can be found even with needing space. So it might be for one person like, okay, I need 3 days on my own out of the whole week, right? Which for me personally, with someone whose love language is quality time primarily, and if you don't know about love languages, I made a podcast episode previously about it as well, then I'm not going to be happy and fulfilled long term in a relationship with a person who needs to spend 3 days a week on his own, right? But it might be someone's genuine need. That's exactly why I broke up with my ex that I was ready to marry, because he wanted to become a writer and he suddenly had a high need for spending a lot of alone time, which wouldn't be fulfilling for me as his partner. That's why we broke up in a very, very loving manner, and we are still besties until this day. So, what to do if we realize that we actually need space based on the trauma and based on the unhealthy dynamic rather than healthy, conscious choice? We need to learn how to have ourselves and other people at the same time. We need to learn that we can stay connected to ourselves while also staying connected to the other. So, it's not about me or you, it's about me and you. Because healthy love doesn't require self abandonment. Healthy love always finds the middle ground, win win scenario. So instead of, for example, not saying something you don't want to do to your partner just to avoid conflict, you can just say, I love you, darling, and this unfortunately doesn't work for me. Can we come up with a different solution that suits us both? Can we think about it and come up with it as a team? Then both connection and authenticity can exist together. And with authenticity, we can create way better relationships. I mean, to me, authenticity and being honest with yourself and others is actually a foundation of a fulfilling relationships. Because otherwise, you are in a relationship with someone else's mask, and someone is in a relationship with your mask, which never works because at some point you will discover who this person really is. And at some point you will also drop your own masks because you can't uphold it for a really long time. It's literally impossible. So many people fear that if I show who I really am, people will abandon me, they will leave, they will not want to be with me. But this is childhood trauma. The opposite is usually true because then authenticity filters the relationships, and everyone who is not aligned with your truth and with who you really are will just leave. And that's okay because you want to only keep people that are actually aligned with your truth in your life. Why would you wear masks your whole life and then pretend who you're not, like for ages? It doesn't make sense. The right people will stay when you're authentic, just the wrong people will leave. So don't worry about it. And the example could be like, okay, someone finally admits to themselves, I actually really need more alone time, instead of pretending that they can be with their partner 24/7, right? So now their partner can relate to it and genuinely understand and work with them. So finding the solution, like, okay, maybe you can take space every day for 4 hours a day just for yourself, right? And then they live happily ever after. Maybe not like this. It's not a Disney movie, real life, but at least they know how to handle their traumas and triggers. So, to summarize everything I said, the goal in a relationship is not to need less connection, because connection is a human need. We are relationally dependent as a species. So, when we are born, we are dependent on our parents and we crave connection more than anything in the world. And the goal is also not to need more space. But the goal is to stop believing that connection means self betrayal, because it doesn't have to be like that at all. And we need to get out of these patterns because true intimacy begins where we realize that we don't need to abandon ourselves to stay close to the other person. And the healthiest relationships are built when two people are in this vibe like, I can be fully myself and stay connected to you at the same time. So let me know how you feel about what I just expressed and whether you need space from a healthy or unhealthy space from space. But you know what I mean, from the perspective of trauma or from a perspective of I really know myself and I'm an artist, for example, or I'm a business person or whatever, and I really need my alone time to be able to fully focus. And that's a completely different vibe because the why behind why you need space is different. The intention is different, so then the result of how it's going to affect your life is also very different. So yeah, let me know in the comments how you feel about what I said. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. And if you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website, karolinakuraj.com, Karolina with K, Kuraj.com. I have lots of fun stuff there, offerings, meditations, programs, and so on. So go check it out if you're interested. And for now, thank you so much for being here with me. And until the next episode.